I'm going to try to make it simple, entertaining, give you a lot of examples, so in the end it will start to make sense. Start with very simple demonstration. We are going to talk about how our vision, I gave many examples in the previous seminar about how our eyes are fooled all the time. I will give you a few more examples about the vision. Here is I stole this from my son. If you see, you all know that this is a disc, but if you watch it, let me hold it up here. Now if it goes like this, if it goes faster, it almost looks like a ball. Now you say, I know a disc because you saw it before. Let's say it was going even faster. It's going a little bit faster now. Looks like a ball. You don't really know, honestly, if it's a ball or a disc. And actually I can make it move faster, and I don't wanna, but you got the point. Last time I gave several examples of so many different kinds of optical illusions. This is one of the optical illusions that people have been come up with. We look at things with pictures. They have been able to devise pictures. It looks like the picture is moving while it's still, and when it's moving, looks like it's still. So the eyes can be very easily fooled. I can make a simple point, which initially won't make sense, but it's very profound. I see what is in front of me, but do I see what is in the back of my head? You might say, well, that's obvious. I mean, how am I going to see in the back of the, but that's my whole point. We are not really conscious of what's going on in our surroundings. You see the high school where they make a joke of put chew gum on your back, because you don't know. We are not, this is how poor our consciousness or awareness is of the environment. We are giving examples of how vision can be fooled. Let's look at some other examples. Any one of you have heard about moon illusion? Okay. Not many people, because astronomers are aware of that. Try this on your own, you will be convinced. One of the evening, start driving towards northwest, towards Nevada, when the moon is upcoming. It's time for the moon to come out. As it's just rising, the moon looks almost as big as the mountain. I know you don't believe me. I did not believe that myself. When I was reading an astronomy book, I said, I'm going to check it out. I was surprised. And then I read the explanation why that is. So I was driving, it was almost 100 miles before I got to Las Vegas. We were going to a conference. And so I had plenty of opportunity to watch the behavior of this moon. So as it was coming up, it got smaller and smaller and smaller. It took about an hour and a half later, it got the size that we look at. It was just amazing. We're not going to get into explanation because we will never finish. I'm going to try to stick today, give you as many examples as I can. Let's talk about sunlight. You know and I know that without sunlight, the light hitting our eyes, we can't really see anything. When there is no lamp, no light, and it's not a moonlight either in the middle of the night, we are literally blind. So light is necessary for us to see anything. So the sunlight that comes down, which is essentially electromagnetic radiation, we see a very tiny fraction of that light, which is about from 370 nanometers to 740 nanometers approximately. And that same light has so many other portions on the right side and the left side. On one side is the ultraviolet light, is the X-rays, is the gamma rays. On the other side we have microwaves, we have radio waves. We see a very tiny fraction. I can tell you that if we could take all these wavelengths and put them next to each other in one single line, or let's put it this way. You take every grain of sand on every beach on earth, and put those grains of sand next to each other and make a line out of that. And let's call it the electromagnetic spectrum. We barely see one grain. That's how blind we are. That's how blind our vision is. Yes, with our technology, we have gamma ray and ultraviolet telescopes which look into the universe. With technology, we can see pretty much. We have x-rays. When you go to hospital, we do x-ray, look into your bones. Can I look at your bones like this? But the x-ray machine has an eye that can look inside. So yes, with technology, we can see the entire spectrum of light, but with our eyes, we see such a tiny fraction. But let's say we want to be proud of the fact that we can see those portions of the light which eyes cannot see. Now we are able to see all of it. We are very proud of it, aren't we? But here is the point. Even if you were to consider that somehow, directly or indirectly, we are able to see all portions of the sunlight, we still see only 4% of the universe, because 96% of the universe is dark matter. Our universe, which is made of atoms and subatomic particles, is only 4% of the universe. But I'm just making it entertaining, but I need to focus on how eyes can be fooled. So let's look at a few other examples. I mean, fancy examples can be, even as we speak, cosmic rays come down and trillions of particles. Imagine when it's snowing really hard. It's snowing all the time. Neutrinos are coming. Trillions of them are going through our body every second. Actually, they go through the entire planet. They come out the other way. But we don't see them. Our eyes are very limited. And the reason for these kind of problems is that we are, if we look at everything in the universe, from the smallest to the largest, we are about medium size. And all we are able to see medium-sized things. We cannot see very small, and we cannot see very large. And that is true for almost everything. We cannot see things that are too fast or too slow. And I can give you several examples. We also cannot see things that are too far or too near. Anything that's in the middle we are able to see. Let's see some examples. We all see electricity on a cloudy day. If you were to take picture with a high-speed camera, you take about, high-speed camera can take 10,000 pictures per second, or there are cameras with higher speed nowadays. And then you project that picture and look at a slower pace, like 10,000 times slower. You will be surprised that in most cases electricity does not come from above, it rises from below. Do we have that perception? Does that sound strange? It is strange, but it's only by using a high-speed camera that we can see what actually goes on. Our eyes do not perceive things that happen too fast. Electricity is one of those examples. Give you an example of things that are very slow. You all heard of coral reef. It's a living organism. It doesn't even look like stone. It moves, but it's so slow you can't even tell that this is an animal. Coral reef is an animal. Look at starfish, sponges, barnacles. Give you another example how eyes are fooled. In the middle of the night when it's very dark, not in moonlight, if you see a plane that is flying very, very high, when it flies very high and it's not necessarily moving fast, it almost looks still, and you see a light. And there are also stars up in the sky. I'm sure all of you have experienced. Can you tell if that's a star or a plane? They both look the same. Are they the same? Are they really the same? The plane and the star. The star could be 10 times or 100 times bigger than our sun. So there are so many examples. There are insects and birds who catch their prey so fast, faster than any technology we ever invented, the fastest plane that we ever invented. They act so fast, or they go from 0 to 60 miles per in an instant, almost instantaneously. We don't even know what's going on in our environment. So things that are too big, too small, too fast, too slow, we cannot tell what's going on, and it goes on all the time in our environment. Let's look at some examples where vision is the primary mode that we use, but there are all other senses involved as well. Any one of you have been to Disney and seen Soaring over California? Nobody has? Oh, okay, you have. So I recommend if you go there, do not sit in the first row, because then we'll see people's feet dangling. Sorry, sit in the first row. If you sit in the second or the third row, you will see people's feet. So sit in the first row. If you sit in the first row, be honest with me. Can you tell me if that's real or not? Soaring over California, right? You experienced that? It's virtual reality. It's absolutely, you're flying in a helicopter, you are over the river, almost touching water. But we know that you are sitting in a theater, basically. But you cannot tell. You know, some people have a little thing with virtual reality. They are like, well, it's not real after all. Sure, it's not real, but let me ask you this. Is telephone real? When telephone was invented, people said, yeah, but you know what? It's a little box you hold in your hand, and you speak into it. It's not real. I mean, it's not real communication. I mean, you don't even know the person you're talking is speaking into. But in today's world, would you call a friend and say, oh, meet me over there, let's get together for lunch, and not believe it? Is that real? It's real for most of us. So telephone is an example of virtual reality that is going to become more common in the future. Basically, I don't want to get into science fiction now, because I'm very prone to moving into different directions and miss the main discussion. But in the future, we will be able to have vacation at home. You go into a ball and walk around. You're walking in Paris. You're visiting restaurants, everything right there in your room. And it's so real. It's becoming more and more sophisticated that your eyes can be fooled to the point that you cannot tell the difference. And Soaring over California is not even as sophisticated yet, but it's sophisticated enough that it's absolutely wonderful experience. Let me give you another example. Where is your consciousness when you're sleeping or you're dreaming? Have you ever thought about it? When you are dreaming, you are having a dream, are you sure it's not real? I'm asking you, when you are having the dream, how sure you are? It's not, when you wake up, of course, you say, oh, thank God, it was a bad dream. You say, thank God, it was a dream. But when you are dreaming, have you ever had a dream which was so good? Maybe you just won a lottery, or you were able to go out with that boyfriend or girlfriend which you always wanted to do. You never had a chance all your life. It was so joyful, and somebody wakes you up and you say, I wish I could go back to sleep and continue the dream. The same is true about nightmares. You wish you never go to sleep. They are so bad. The point I'm trying to make, dreams to you, to your whatever subconscious or unconscious mind, they are real when they are happening. If you guys choose to do that, it's a very fascinating topic. Love to do a 2-hour talk on that. But this was just an example. I'm sure every single one of you have an experience where something was on your mind and you left your work and you lived 2 hours away and you don't even know what happened. You pulled up in your front of your house. It's called highway hypnosis. You have no idea how fast. You said you just started driving, you already got there. Because something is in your mind, you are just using your vision and driving, but your mind is doing something and you don't know how the time passed. So you were not aware of what was going on the right or left, what happened on the way. There was a small accident. There were postures. The same person can, in a different state of mind, can notice every little detail. Time can slow down or speed up. Point I'm trying to make is your vision depends on what's going on in your head. Will also influence how much you notice, how much your senses are able to perceive, and those perceptions are going to change into how aware you are. And if your senses were limited, you're not paying attention, then everything else is going to be limited. And your consciousness will become very limited as well. Let's compare our senses, our 5 senses, with the senses of animals. Let's see how smart our senses are when we compare them with animals. Let's talk about vision. We all know that many animals, cats, lions, etc., they can see in the dark. They have night vision because they have something in the back of their eyeball called tapetum lucidum, which we don't have. Actually, they can implant that in humans nowadays, so you can see at night. But animals have the ability to see in the dark. Remember I talked about we see only visible light from 370 to 740 nanometers. There are some insects which can see the ultraviolet light. We can see ultraviolet light only with our technologies. But there are many little insects that can see ultraviolet light. Let's talk about hearing. We all have dogs, and we know the dogs, sometimes the dog ears go up all of a sudden, and you're like, what is he hearing? I mean, why is so alert? They can hear as far away as almost 10 miles. Humans can detect sound only between about 2 hertz to 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. But dogs can, sound is just like electromagnetic radiation, it has its own waves. Dogs can see as many as twice the number of frequencies that humans can hear or perceive. Deers, many other animals can hear from long distances. There are animals and sea life that move around by echolocation. Examples are bats. There are 2 kinds of bats. One of them make a noise, and what this noise does is it's like a sonar. We have the technology for all these qualities that animals have. But animals are endowed with these abilities of 5 senses that we are not. So these bats can send a sound wave, and the sound wave hit the wall, comes back, or hit another bat that's flying nearby, come back, and instantly their brain can calculate how far this bat is. So they can fly in tens of thousands into the cave, and they don't hit each other or don't hit the wall. Whales, look at whales. Whales can send very low frequency sounds under the sea. Some of these wavelengths are miles long. So they can hear another whale which is in the Arctic Ocean, or thousands of miles away, they can communicate. we can barely create a sound, and a person who's using the bathroom behind the wall can't hear me. The waves can communicate from thousands of miles away because they can create this very high wavelength, very long wavelength and very high pitch sound that can travel very, very far. There are many other species that can do similar things, such as giraffes and dolphins, etc. Actually, whales can also send, when they create this sound, they send also use the floor of the ocean. Ocean can be different depth at different locations. It can be 7 miles deep. That's probably the deepest ocean is in some places. It can be 2 miles. Some places near the beaches it could be half a mile or less than half a mile. As you go deeper into ocean, it gets deeper and deeper. So these whales will send sound waves downwards. It hit the ocean floor. It comes back, and they can figure out where in that ocean they are. They don't have a map. They don't have a GPS system. They don't have a compass, but they know exactly how to detect, how to communicate, and go thousands of miles away to either feed or breed. Most animals, when they migrate, they do either for feeding purposes or breeding purposes. We do the same, basically. We are too cocky to admit that. So I can tell you that the reason it's important to compare our ability of our senses with animals is to make the point that our senses are limited, and therefore our perception is limited, and therefore our awareness and consciousness becomes limited. So I'm going to emphasize this point over and over again and remind you why I'm giving you these examples. That's the underlying purpose. Humans in some cases can develop these extraordinary faculties, and one of the theme in these examples, when I get into the science portion of it, I'll show you how human brain, when it has a damage or deprived of something, it has the ability to now focus all its energy on developing a special faculty. There's a boy in Los Angeles, his name is Juan. He was born blind, and he has been able to develop this bat-like ability, so he can go into neighborhood anywhere by making this sound. So he knows if the car is in front, if there's a wall or a pole, he can avoid all of that. So just by, he can use his ears as his eyes. And when they take MRI images, it's amazing. I'm going to talk about synesthesia later on. It's a very fascinating subject, how you can use one sense as a substitute for the other sense. That discussion is coming later on. The most wonderful thing in cases like this is that some of these individuals who are born blind, they not only can avoid running into something, but they can actually tell you what is in front. That is still scientists it's mind-boggling to understand how they do that. Now you might wonder, if someone who was born blind, I understand that with sound or feeling they can tell something is in the front, so avoid it. But how can they tell that it's a chair versus a table? They will tell you that. So it's possible that the sound waves, they can differentiate between very, very small distance. They can even tell you the structure that they're looking at. Are they looking at a car, a bicycle, a pole, a wall, a door, a table, a chair? So that's amazing. Let's talk about smell. Compare our smell with animals. Dogs have in their brain an area which is 40 times bigger than the area allocated to smell, so to speak, in humans. And as a result, correspondingly, human nose has about 5 million receptors for smell. Dogs have about 300 million. Dogs can actually use each nostril for different purposes. How many of you have dogs, animals? Okay, you know that when you're cooking in the kitchen, they will frequently come in the kitchen. They can smell each ingredient in your cooking. They can, I wish they could speak and tell you, this is from experimental basis. They can tell you that there is a curcumin used, there's salt in there, there's spinach. Each single ingredient they can smell separately. That's how much sense of smell dogs have compared to humans. But let me give you more wonderful examples. And you know, there is obviously a good reason why police will use dogs. If a robber or someone has left 15 minutes ago and is already 10 miles away, the dog will still trace the path, will lead you there, because they have this extraordinary ability. Anybody knew that rats actually can smell better than dogs? I do not know how many times potent their sense of smell is, but anybody knew that bears' sense of smell is 10 times better than dogs? I'm sorry, I should have, let me correct it. It's 10,000 times. So overall, for humans, you can calculate if dogs are 10 times better and bears are 10,000 times better than dogs. So bears can smell 100,000 times better than humans. If you live in Mammoth or somewhere, you know, where there are a lot of bears, if you just put your food garbage in the garbage pail, he can smell it right from top of the mountain. He will come right there. He knows there's food 5 miles away. Dogs can actually, it's the same story. I'm really saying the same thing. In terms of vision, we see only this little segment, and we don't see what's on the right and left. Same thing with sound. Animals, we see only certain frequencies. I keep saying see, we hear only certain frequencies, whereas animals can hear a lot on the right, a lot on the left. For example, dogs can hear ultrasound. Ultrasound means higher frequencies. Infrasound means lower frequencies. So ultrasound that I use in my office to look at women's uterus and ovaries, I don't hear it, but it's sending sound waves inside and therefore giving me the picture. But dogs, if there was a dog can actually hear it and get excited. Whales, on the other hand, they hear infrasound. I already mentioned infrasound means longer wavelength and higher frequency. So whales can send a sound which is each wave is several miles long, so it can very quickly travel to 1,000 miles away. And whales can literally talk to each other. There are other animals such as giraffe, dolphins, they all can, just like the whales, hear infrasound. Let's talk about touch. I can give you an example of touch. Salamander is blind. And salamander can feel the minutest change in pressure in the environment when he's swimming through water. So he knows exactly how far away the prey is. Just by feeling the touch of water, he'll go ahead and quickly grab the prey. So all 5 senses, we have examples in the animal world where you can argue that they receive more perception from their surrounding. They maybe interpret in that sense, interpret their environment much better than we do. The whole point of the argument is to emphasize that we humans have limitations at the very basic fundamental level of limitation of our senses, which means our perceptions are going to become limited, and therefore awareness and consciousness is going to be limited. So every 10 minutes I'm going to bring up the same point. After giving you more examples, then I come back and emphasize the same point. Now let's compare humans with animals in situations where we use pretty much all of our senses. We use multiple senses, and we are engaged in very complex observation or perception. Sometimes we call it intuition. People like to sometimes call it the sixth sense, or they use all kind of terminology: extrasensory perception, paranormal experience, supernatural, metaphysical, whatever you want to call it. Maybe call it gut feeling. I think that's a nice word. We all like it. So let's talk about the gut feeling of these animals versus ours, where every part of our observation or senses are engaged, very deeply engaged. Let's take an example. Let's say there's an elephant in Sahara Desert. So hundreds of miles, there is nothing. And maybe very few places you can find water, source of water. You blindfold this elephant and leave him anywhere, he will find that water. You place an adult human over there, I can guarantee you will die within a few hours of dehydration. But let's say you have the ability, like the elephant, to stay dehydrated for 3 weeks, whatever. You will still die. You will not find that water. So you want to talk about this sixth sense, or to be able to feel where that water is. He will keep on traveling in that direction and he will find that water. Let me give you examples of other animals to show you that we are big losers in this department. Horses. Let's say you live somewhere in Montana or Siberia or Alaska where it snows a lot. So you have all your signposts, everything. There are highway signs, snow so much, several feet. The highway signs, signposts, everything is covered. If you are somewhere and you luckily have your horse with you, that horse will find your home, will take you home. If you are on your own and you don't have GPS system, you don't have something to go by, you don't have a compass, you are gone. You will not survive. The horse doesn't have a GPS system, doesn't have a compass, he did not print directions from the computer MapQuest before he left, but he will take you home. We all know that this is not really an example of senses, but I want to make this discussion fun, so give you more examples. You compare wildebeests, cows, buffaloes. You know, when they deliver a baby, just for literally few seconds, the baby does this, try to stand up, and within, it's not even 1 minute yet, it's already walking. And the animal also knows where the mama's boobies are, goes right straight over there. Look at the human baby, it's so vulnerable. You really have to bring the baby's mouth close to the boob before it kind of smells and latch onto it. But if the baby is here, it's totally helpless. It takes 1 year for the baby to start walking. This is not exactly an example of comparing senses, but I want to make it fun, so I'll throw examples like that here and there. But we will try to stick with the subject matter. It has been observed all over the world that dogs, cats, cattle, horses, rats, rabbits, you name any animal, whenever there is a volcano about to be erupt or there's going to be an earthquake, these animals way ahead of time, before we know, they will start to kind of run around. It's been observed in earthquakes and volcanoes. They can probably hear the rumble in the earth crust, which could be still 15 miles deep, like the magma is starting to rise through a crack. It's still so deep our machines cannot detect. And these animals already start running because they know something is wrong, because they can hear those frequencies that our seismographs have not yet picked up. Again, to make it fun, I want to give you examples of, we are talking about gut feeling here, using our senses, kind of feel our way, use our gut feeling. Migratory birds. Nowadays you can find their schedule. Actually, they will tell you what species of bird travels from where to where in winter or fall or spring. There are birds from South America that migrate, fly thousands of miles away, all the way to the Arctic. And then they, as soon as they're done with their breeding or feeding, they start flying back. They don't have a GPS system. They don't have any map that they follow. You look at in Asia, there are birds that start flying from South India or Asia. They go fly over Himalayas, go to Siberia, do the breeding, and it's almost time to start flying back. They don't have a map. They know exactly, and they will land on the same exact beach thousands of miles away every single time. They never make a mistake. This is fun. Allow me distraction just for 2 seconds. It reminds me of a quote from Guru Nanak. Once he said, "Ude ud ave seko santis pache bachre sharia tin kavan khlave kavan chagave man mein simran karya." Ignore the gibberish. You don't understand. But what it means, he says, these birds, they fly thousands of miles away. Then they breed, and then they start flying. As soon as the chicks are hatched, they start flying back. So he says, the next question he's asking in the last 2 lines, who feeds these chicks? How do they survive? And then he's a symbolic thing. He says, these chicks do Samran in their heart. Samran means it's actually the rosary that the Catholics use, but that's just a symbolic. Trying to make a point that in nature is so wonderful that we worry about our retirement accounts, or we're going to have enough money and all that. Who takes care of these chicks? They survive, most of them. So let's not, those of us who use antidepressants, because so much pressure, the nature takes care of us. So that's the spirituality of all of this. And these are the kind of things I want to discuss in later. We're going to have a series on happiness. If we understand what happiness, we will be happy. If we don't understand what happiness is, we will not be happy. It's very simple. Anyways, let me bring myself back to the issue, because we're going to stick with senses leading to perceptions, and the limitation of perceptions causing limitation in the awareness, and that limitation causing our consciousness to be very limited. We are very limitedly conscious of our environment. I'll give you another example about a gut feeling. In the Arctic Ocean, when it freezes in the winter, it's half a mile long. It's the whole ocean freezes, and new icebergs form. And there are several species of Arctic birds. Before the winter, when it's nice and grassy and the grass is growing, they will take nuts from the trees and bury them, because they know winter is coming. There's not going to be any food, so they bury them. When the winter comes, there is so much snow that there is absolutely no way of knowing, even with our technology, where that nut was buried, because there's no reference. There's the tree that was right next to it, which we could use as a reference. I buried it right next to that tree. The damn tree is buried under snow. But within this area of literally scores of miles, that bird goes exactly, knows where that nut is buried, and will burrow and find that nut. It's amazing. Nature is beautiful. It's absolutely amazing. And so we are, the point is, not as amazing as we think we are. Insects, honeybees, birds, bats, spiders, school of fish, locust. You could take almost many species examples. They are conscious of things that we can't even dream about. I can tell you when the locusts fly, they are about 40 to 80 million in 1 square mile, and they fly in billions. You heard the stories of when locusts destroyed all the crops. They fly in billions, and they are so close to each other, they don't hit each other because they also use echolocation. Now compare that with the stampede, human consciousness about the same thing. If you have stampede in a stadium or a cinema hall where it's dark, somebody says, "A fire!" and everybody runs out. You know what happens. All the weaklings, they get killed. So, all I'm trying to say is that I'm taking advantage of giving these examples about mind and consciousness, but also making some other points. Advantage and reminding you that if we still think that God made us in His image, please think again. Maybe He created the whole creation in His image, not just us. We are not special. The whole creation is special. The whole creation is wonderful. It's awesome. It's mind-bogglingly beautiful. So that is why it's so unfair to say that the rest of the creatures on earth are made for us so we can exploit them and destroy the earth. Now I want to, in the beginning, I don't know if I made this point, when we use our senses, that experience is going to translate into two kinds of things. One is simple experience. We get to know the smell of a thing. We know what something looks like. And then we can get information from the past that we used our senses, from the present, and kind of combine it and get sophisticated experiences based on that combination of several incidences of interacting with the environment. We can interpret our world much better. But these senses, as they become perceptions and become of awareness, can also translate into something even more wonderful. And that is, we can now begin to form constructs, new ideas, conceptions. But in order to formulate these amazing new ideas, the more information we had, the more we can synthesize. It's almost like using a conglomeration or consolidation of ideas of our experience, our education, what we learn. We take advantage from the experience of millions of people that have lived before us in recorded history and then come up with even more wonderful. This is how science works. For example, Einstein was able to think of time as something which is a dimension of space, just like the length, breadth, or the height. This is what it's one of the 4 dimensions. So that would not be possible just by simply using our senses. That would take enormous amount of information which you conglomerate, you bring it together, and then through the power of our contemplation or brooding over it, pondering over it, you can come up with what we call thought experiments and come up with wonderful ideas. But remember, it all started with senses. It got very sophisticated in the end for some people, but it all started with what we perceive in our environment. Initially we use our own senses, but then we can start to use the senses of other human beings, their experiences, and read about it, and then come up with even more wonderful inventions. So for understanding our universe and to come up with complex ideas, Maybe a single individual is just too stupid to understand our world, but when the experiences of all individuals is combined, it can lead to some wonderful discoveries. The complex ideas that we have discovered throughout history, they are not obvious. They are not going to come just by looking at something or using our senses. They come from our experience, and that knowledge we pass on to the future generations. I want to give you some examples of these wonderful, amazing constructs that we've been able to come up with, such as I gave you the example of Einstein and Isaac Newton. They will not be obvious. They will show every single minute of the day limitation of our consciousness. We are not conscious of those things. Just a week ago, I was coming back from San Diego, took my kids to safari over there. As I'm coming back, my wife is sitting on the right side, and my daughter, 7-year-old daughter, says to her, "Mom, do we live in Earth or on Earth?" And the mother says, "We live on Earth. We live on it, not in it." Then the next question she hurls at her, "Mom, but do we also live in space?" She says, No, we don't live in space." But she says, "My dad told me we live in space." And my wife looked at me that I'm crazy. And this is the point I'm trying to make. It is not obvious to us that we live in space. Everything lives in space. There are balls like this everywhere, planets. This is one of them in space-time. Earth is one of the billions and trillions, quadrillions actually. And we are stuck like little ants, everything in space moving. We live in space. But is that obvious to us? It's not very obvious. The point I'm trying to make is our consciousness of our surroundings, our environment, of our world is very limited as it is. Yes, we can construct ideas based on human experience in the past. I want to give you many, many other examples. Last time I was given an example. I said Earth is round. How obvious is that to us? If we did not read in a physics book, if we didn't go to high school, is that obvious? It's not obvious. You keep on walking as far as you want. Looks all flat. There is anybody heard about Flat Earth Society? Actually, there's a Flat Earth Society. And they rationalize, they try to give scientific argument why Earth is flat. So I was giving an example last time that if you start walking straight, let's say there were no oceans in the way, and I keep on walking straight, and let's say I could walk in water, like Jesus Christ, and what's going to happen? 5 years later, I keep on walking, and I'm going to come through the back wall, because I started here, and I came where I started from. Is that obvious to us? It's not. I gave examples that it's not obvious to us, like I said, that we are rotating this ball, little ball, Earth, is rotating at the equator. Equator right here in the middle is rotating at almost 1,000 miles per hour. And if you go above or below, then it's rotating less because this is the greater diameter. So actually, believe it or not, NASA take advantage of that. When they send shuttles up, they use that as a slingshot. Do you ever wonder why a lot of the shuttles mostly leave from Florida? Because it's as close to equator as possible. They want to take advantage of the Earth's rotation, and they know which way it's rotating. So when the shuttle goes up, the Earth give it a slingshot. It's already push it up into the air at 1,000 miles without we having to make the effort. So it's not obvious to any one of us that by the time we finish this seminar, we will be thousands, millions of miles away from where we were when we started the seminar. Actually, I can prove to you that we will be millions of miles away every second. Every time I blink an eye, I'm thousands of miles away. This is how it works. Just think about it. Very simple. And we know all of this because of our education. If we didn't have education, is that obvious to anyone? It's not obvious. Here is the reason. The Earth is going around at this 1,000 miles per hour. And then at the same time, it's going around the sun at 70,000 miles per hour. And guess what? The whole solar system is going around the supermassive black hole at 500,000 miles an hour. The whole solar system is moving. If that's not good enough for you, I can tell you the entire Milky Way galaxy is hurtling in space at about 3/4 of a million miles per hour towards Andromeda galaxy, of different celestial bodies at the same time. And I calculate where you will be 1 second from now. You're millions of miles away already. I like to give you most amazing examples, but here is the point. We don't want to get lost in examples. We want to keep in the back of our minds the point that I'm trying to make. That these amazing constructs that we have, they are not the result of any individual's perceptions or any individual's interpretation of the world. This has been built on over thousands of years. The things that we understand today, and we understand because of, thanks to the sacrifices of millions of smart minds that have passed on this information to us. So we are talking about these amazing constructs, which our consciousness of one individual is very limited and cannot grasp these ideas. But thousands of people put together, their experiences can lead to amazing stuff. For example, here's another question for you. Anybody knows what time is? What is time? Most of you are at least heard about it. If you don't know the details, the time can slow down, time can speed up, time can even stop. I can tell you that this may be new to you. They have been now able to stop light. Can you stop light coming from the sun? Yes, of course, they have not been able to stop the sunlight, but in the laboratory at least, by reducing the temperature close to absolute zero, the light stops moving. It's coming fast at the speed of light, and then it slows down and almost slows down, but you can watch it slowing down and then it stops. And all of this comes from learning over hundreds of years of research, experimentation, and understanding of our nature that is around us. How obvious is to any of our consciousness the fact that speed of light doesn't change? Now, what does that mean? Don't want to go into too much detail, just move on after making the point. If two cars are side by side going on the highway, my car is going at 50 miles an hour and yours is on the right hand side is going at 51 miles an hour. To me, when I look at your car, it's moving at 1 mile an hour, very, very slow, because I'm catching up right away at 50 miles, you moving slightly. That doesn't apply to speed of light. In other words, if speed of light is moving at 100 miles an hour, it goes at 186,000 miles per hour, but let's say speed of light is moving right by my side, on my right side, on the same highway, at 100 miles an hour. Let's say that's the speed of light. And I am driving at 99.5 miles per hour next to the speed of light. So how fast for me that speed of light should be moving? Half miles an hour? No. Speed of light still moving at 100 miles an hour. Is that intuitively make sense to you? It doesn't. Why is that? Because our senses are limited. Let's say it's almost like a prayer. Every 15 minutes I'm going to remind you. Limitation of senses will lead to limitation of our perceptions, and limitation of our perceptions will lead to limitation of our awareness, and limitation of our awareness of our surroundings and our world will lead to a broader concept, a limitation that is put on our consciousness. We are not conscious. We are not very much conscious of what's going on in our environment. That is why science becomes so important, because science builds on ideas that have been constructed over thousands of years, and they have been built on. Now, if someone doesn't believe it or kind of say, that is strange, these are strange ideas, actually a lot of our technology is built on that idea. The GPS system is built on that. The time slows down. And time can move faster depending on how fast or slow time is going to move depends on two things. Number one, where you are in the universe, how close you are to a celestial body, and how fast you are moving. Those two things will determine how fast or slow the time goes. Is it intuitive to you? Are you conscious of the fact that the time at my feet, the clock, if I put a clock at my feet and I put another same clock, let's say two similar clocks, I put a clock on my feet and clock on my head. The clock on my head is moving faster. Is that intuitive? Does that make sense? But guess what? That is true. Actually, with atomic clocks, you can measure the difference. Put an atomic clock here, because atomic clock can divide 1 second into almost 2 billion parts. So it can measure those small portions. Our technology GPS system is built on, because the satellites are about 200 miles up, and the time over there moves faster. And every so many seconds it sends messages on the Navy headquarters, where the computers detect, and accordingly the cars, everybody driving car, the adjustment is being made. If that adjustment of time is not made, you put into Tehachapi address when you're coming from Sacramento, and you will end up in Lancaster, because they did not do the adjustment. Because time moves at different speeds at different locations in the universe. If you could run as fast as almost close to the speed of light, time will stop. You will stop growing, believe it or not. You all heard about twin paradox, but we are not going to go into detail. That's too much information for this seminar. But you can, if you were moving that fast, you will not age. You can live 1,000 years. You can live 10,000 years. Is that a fact? That is a fact. Is that intuitively make sense to us? It doesn't. But that's true. Okay, another fascinating idea. You tell me if it's intuitive to you if I told you that you cannot see me in the present. You are looking at me, Dr. Singh, who was a person in the past. Why is that intuitive to anyone? It's not. But why is that true? It is true for the simple fact that the speed of light is very, very fast, but nonetheless limited. It's not infinite. The light from you to me cannot reach me instantly. It takes time. It's very small fraction of time, but then nonetheless it takes time. Actually, that's a wonderful thing that worked out to be the most wonderful discovery in physics, because based on that we were able to do a lot of clever things. But you might say to me, well, big deal. I see Dr. Singh in the past, but it's a blink of an eye, like it's so little it doesn't even matter. You are right. But let's take another example, unless you become convinced that it does matter. The light that leaves the moon takes about 1.5 seconds to get here. So the moon that we are looking at, it's what it was 1.5 seconds ago. You might again argue, well, what's the big deal? It's still the same moon. What's going to happen in a second and a half? Okay, I can buy that argument. Let's move on. See, unless you are convinced. The sun that we are looking at, at any given time is about 8 minutes what it was 8 minutes ago. Because it's 93 million miles away, that's how long it takes for the light to get here, to our eyes. Does that matter? Well, if you think about it, it sort of does, because sun could have exploded 5 minutes ago and I don't know. I'm still looking at the sun that is 8 minutes old. It still doesn't impress you, right? But the point I'm trying to make is that obvious to us? Are we conscious of that fact? But is that fact true? That makes no sense to our awareness, but nonetheless is true? It is true. Let's take another example that may impress you. Let's say you are looking at a star that is about, anyone want to volunteer, tell me your age, and you can lie, it's okay. Tell me. You want to?
25.
You're 25, okay. Let's say you're 25 years old. There is a star up in the sky. Let's say, it's a thought experiment. Let's say other extraterrestrial civilizations do exist. And there's a civilization which is on a star system, on a planet, which is exactly 25 light years away. Now, they are advanced civilizations, so they are watching you on their television. Your mama is, have a baby in her. So you're a baby in your mama's arms. That's what they're seeing. Now you might say to me, well, but that's not real. Is that real? Anybody believes that's real? You don't think it's real? You think your sense of time is more real than their sense of time? Why is that? Why you are more real than their sense of time? The point I'm trying to make is, we're making the discussion a little more interesting by giving you an example, but we come back down to the idea that our consciousness, our awareness, these are limitations of our perception and limitations of our consciousness we are talking about. After we establish this point, then we are going to move on to what consciousness is. Those discussions are yet to come. I don't know if we will get to that today, but that first, if we do not get that idea, it's hard to move on. It's easy to listen to a priest, he will tell you everything, he knows everything about consciousness, because he talks to God all the time. But the thing is, do you want to really convince yourself with those ideas, or you want to kind of research and try to understand? That's why I'm giving a lot of examples so it becomes established in your mind that our consciousness is very limited. Again, because it's so entertaining, I like to give a few more examples. Think of magic. How magic fools your eyes. You know that magicians walk on water, they can fly in air. To most of us, unless we know the tricks, do magic to that level, it's not obvious to us. How the hell this person is floating in air? I don't see any strings, I don't see any pulleys, it's broad daylight. So do you really trust your eyes? You still think that your eyes are so good, that your perceptions are so real, that you're not making a fool of yourself? Way back when I used to do something similar, we call them discourses in meetings. So I used to have little fun. I do mentalism with the audience. And I remember there was one, I used to meet every it used to be every Saturday, then it became Sunday. There were only two ladies in there. So I said to them, I said, how many fingers are these? So one of them said it's 3 and the other one said 4. And they kind of looked at each other like they were, she thought she's crazy and she thought she's crazy. I said, it's not your fault, I'm doing something. I said, okay, let's try again. Now the woman who was saying it's 3 fingers now said 4 fingers, and the woman who was saying 4 fingers now said 3 fingers. Now they really went crazy. They started fighting with each other. And then I told them that this is something I'm doing. I'm positioning the fingers in a way. They said, well, how could you do that? It's broad daylight. I said, people can do that. You have seen, you go magic shows, you have seen things that are more amazing. It's all doable. But you cannot trust your eyes. Eyes can be fooled. Our vision, our sense of taste, sense of smell, all of them can be fooled. This phenomenon is called mentalism. And mentalism basically states, the idea of mentalism is that it's our mental states that cause action, that cause behavior. It's called cognitive behavior as opposed to behaviorism. So that's the idea, that our cognition is what will determine how we behave, how we act. So if someone can fool you, they can also fool you into acting foolishly. And this all happens all the time. I had a glass of water here. I want to do another example with you. If I were to take this water and pour over, what will happen? It will spill. Okay, now I decided that I'm going to drive, north 200 miles to Sacramento and try it over there. Something different happens. And I do this, what will happen? In Sacramento, same thing happens. Now let me ask you, give you a suggestion. Instead of going that way, you just decide to go 200 miles up. Now you got the clue what I'm trying to say. What happens if I spill water? Just 200 miles up. Not that far. This hole, I can pour as much water as I want to. It becomes a circular ball of water, shimmering, and it starts running around the earth at 17,000 miles per hour. It doesn't look like it's running because you are running with it. You are the astronaut. The shuttle is running with you. Actually, over there it feels that the shuttle is moving like an ant, like 1 mile an hour, because you're looking at the earth ball, which is very slowly rotating in front of you. Are we conscious of these things? We are not. So this is to enforce the idea how our senses can be fooled. I can never forget this funny story. I used to have a medical assistant, very bright girl, very organized, multitasker, can do things very fast, very creative on the phone, everything. It was just wonderful. Never had an employee like that. But she has trouble with, she came to some of my discourses and she started saying, she said, but Dr. Singh, that bothers me, it doesn't make sense. You are saying earth is like that. If that's true, then, if I start walking this way, I'm going to fall. I tried very, very hard to simplify that for her. She just won't get it. She won't get it. Here is a prime example that you people probably get it easily. I'm not comparing, I'm just giving an example that for some people it's very difficult. Why would I not fall? So I tried very hard. I kept on telling her, in space there is no up and down. It's a mental construct that you have. It's for survival. Your brain has been trained to think that way. But in space where we are, if you say my mother just visiting Australia and I'm here and she's on the opposite side of the earth, so her head must be upside down. So, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of examples that I could give you that our brain, our perceptions can be fooled, even our brain can be fooled. That will come later. That's when the lecture becomes very interesting, when we give you examples of medical brain defects, genetic defects, lesions in the brain, what happens. Very, very interesting discussion will come. But we're going to form a foundation for that discussion first. If we don't have the foundation, we cannot move on. So basically, consciousness is something that we developed through evolution in our history, and we got smarter and smarter. And the reason we are smarter, we can tap into that previously existing knowledge which is sitting in libraries, which has been passed on to us generation after generation after generation. I mean, otherwise, if you look at the just the raw experience, look at a child, a baby. You know, baby doesn't even know that it's a person. It's not until the age of about 1.5-year-old the babies get really curious with the mirrors. They start to touch and see the person on the other side is a me, start to experiment. They still don't understand what I'm looking at is me, and then they will put their tongue against. You all remember your kids growing up. They try to touch with the tongue, and they say, okay, tongue touches, the other baby does the same thing. They kind of wonder, and finally they figure out that I'm a person. So how conscious is a human child? Animals do that too, by the way. But we develop, as the brain grows, we as humans, we develop consciousness. We become more and more conscious of our environment. And then if we are clever enough, we can start tapping into the experience of thousands of other people who came before us over thousands of years, and take that and construct wonderful ideas out of that. Want to hear a couple of more examples, or you got tired? We have a very poor perception of deep time. Anybody knows what deep time is when we use that terminology? Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. But let's do a thought experiment again and see where our consciousness is, how poor it is. Our entire history of human species, when there were a couple of tribes in East Africa that started to migrate about 100,000 years ago, and then proliferated, populated the whole. Or some people still in denial, they say, how could this be? I have a blonde hair, and how could that African be from the same mother and father? I have a bad news for you. That is true. It's over thousands of years. The environment and genetic mutations do that, so you become suitable to the environment where you migrate. That's why we look so different. But we have the same mother and father, believe it or not, all of us. That's not the point I'm trying to make. I want to make the point that we have such a poor perception of deep time. Our entire history, since we were have not even yet figured out that if you strike two stones, we can create fire. Maybe we're still learning. We're still eating meat. We had no idea about crops, grains. It's about 5,000 generations, if you calculate. That's about 100 or 150,000 years ago when species start develop. They were not humans. They were other hominid species that are very similar but not as intelligent. Brain is still changing. Homo sapiens came only like a couple of millions years ago. It evolved into Homo sapiens, which is our species. If you look back at the oldest civilizations that we've been able to dig out, find out what's the oldest thing that we've been able to find. We found first pyramids. We know, okay, it's about maybe 3,000 years old, 5,000, 3,000 BC, another 2,000, so 5,000 years old. Then for a long time we didn't know that Stonehenge is older than pyramids. We thought they were about the same time, but we figured out that they are probably 7,000 years old. And then it's only like a couple of years ago, a German scientist, I believe archaeologist, he was able to unearth a monolith, a civilization called Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is 11,500 years old. That's the oldest thing. People always talk about pyramids, Stonehenge, but they don't know that something else has been discovered, which is even goes 4,000 years before that. But this is just for some fun stuff. But I'm not going to miss the point that I'm making. If you want to look at the civilizations that we are familiar with, that we dug out, they form about 200 generations. From 12, 14,000 years ago, only we are talking about 200 generations. If we want to take the whole species from when it bifurcated into something more like a human started walking, that's about 5,000 generations. Now compare that to the time of Earth that has been around. There is an easy way to understand. Those big numbers, very difficult to deal with. So let's do a thought experiment. Take the entire age of Earth and shrink it into 1 year. Because that's what we understand. Our days and calendars and months, weeks, that's what we understand much better. So let's say the entire age of Earth so far is going to continue to live. Earth will be still alive for another 4 or 5 billion years. But let's say the Earth is only 1 year old, so that now we can make sense out of this. It turns out that all those 5,000 generations I'm talking about now, when species develop, we don't even know much about those previous species of humanoids. That is equivalent to 1 last second on December 31st, before the ball drops, Happy New Year in New York City. The last 1 second, that's when we arrived on this planet. And I'm taking the entire history of our species. If you want to take when we formed these monotheistic religions 2,000-3,000 years ago, when we got really cocky and we said that we know everything, God made us in His image. If you want to take that, then it is only 1/100th of 1 second. Now what's amazing to me is that we arrived here in the last fraction of 1 second at the end of the year, and we are so cocky that we declared that the entire universe was created for our purpose. That we can rape the earth, we can destroy water, air, kill all animals, wildlife, do whatever we want to do, because the entire purpose of this earth is us. That is the purpose. Genesis. I'm taking a little distraction because I want to have a little fun. I promise you I'm going to get back into brain, mind, and consciousness. Genesis chapter 26 or section 26 says, "Then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So this is how we got our license to rape Mother Earth. And look at the wonderful creation that we talked about, animals, their abilities. They are better survivors. I'm going to go into a lot more detail. And I'm not picking on Christianity. A small religion where I was born in, Sikhism, says the same thing. All major religions say the same thing. He says, "This which tarti thap rakhi dharmsal." He says, this entire universe, this was the one place of worship where God put it there for us. That's the entire purpose of creation. Islam says it, Judaism says it, Hindu says it. Without this idea, there is no religion out there. So like I said, there are hundreds of other examples that we can discuss how the brain and mind functions, but let's learn what we can learn from the above examples that I gave you. And I think that the above examples basically teach us two lessons. I'm just taking a break from the main discussion because I want to make a point. Because it itches me. It's almost, I can't help it. I must make this point. We have learned two lessons. Number one, we already made the point that our consciousness is limited. And the second one, I think it's connected to that. So once we understand the world around us, it does make us humble. It gives us humility. And it makes us spiritual, believe it or not. It makes us truly spiritual to understand that fact. To understand that the creation is just as important to God, entire creation, as ourselves, that we are not special in God's creation. I would think it would be more fair to say that humans are as wonderful and as special as everything else. So we need to look at the entire creation as the wonder, not just be self-centered and exploit the rest of the world, because we think that that was the entire purpose of creation. I want to give you a few more examples. If you allow me a couple of more minutes of distraction, then I'll get back to the main topic. I want to give you a few more examples how we are part of God's wonderful creation, and we are inseparable from God's artwork. Everything in the creation is God's artwork, so to speak. It's the most wonderful creation. And what we are essentially doing is we insult our own intelligence when we say that God made us in His own image, and we are the purpose. A few examples, I'll tell you how we live together in mutual relationship with the world around us. And God intended it this way. And allow me to use the word God. I mean, this is really symbolic. It's nothing to do with your beliefs, whether you're atheist. I'm trying to make a point, and everybody need to understand that. I want to show you how God has made us inseparable from nature. Nature is us, and we are nature. And we are inseparable. That's the beauty of this universe that we live in. There are about 2 pounds of bugs in our gut system. And if you count them, they are billions in number. There are billions of bugs, bacteria live in our gut. And some of them will have relationship with us, which will be considered as mutualism, commensalism. Some of them are parasitic, but a lot of them are obligate. These are terminology, ignore it. I'm trying to make a point. In obligate relationship means that we wouldn't be here if the bacteria was not there. Because digestive system won't work. Actually, we will not make it to birth. We will not be born. We won't be here. So God has intended a wonderful creation of interdependence. Everything you look at, you should get goosebumps when you see the wonderfulness of this world. If you take, if you want to look at the ratio, one human versus there are about billion other creatures. That's what the ratio is. That's how dominant other creatures are. If you take a scoop of dirt from your backyard, that has more bacteria than the entire human population of Earth. Now we tend to think that we are superior, that we have intelligence, we can kill anybody else, we can destroy. We take pride in that. But are we really? Can we really? Do we really have the power to destroy everything else? It's a fact of life that even in the past, when disasters, catastrophes have happened, like asteroid or meteor, a big one hit the Earth and they eliminated the species completely. Every life wiped out. But bacteria can live 7, 10 miles, 20 miles down into the crust. They never die. They are indestructible. And the funny thing is that this is a well-known fact that 99% of the species that ever lived have been destroyed. Bacteria is really one exception. there are still bacteria out there that were about almost 4.4 billion years ago, they have been able to find the fossils of bacteria. It's almost getting to the point when the Earth was forming. And we still have those species that existed 4 billion years ago. Every other big species, animals are extinct now. And we got here in the last fraction of a second. The history of planet Earth shows that no species has ever lived forever. There's a time species are born and they die. So if we have only this planet to inhabit, there's a pretty good chance we will be gone one day. You know why scientists always call this dinosaur planet? Because dinosaurs were the longest living species that were able to live almost like 150 to 200 million years. We have just got here, 100,000 years. And if you want to look at the Homo sapiens, it doesn't even count. We've been here only for like 2 million years. You know, one can make a lot of philosophical arguments that we have technologies, we are smarter. And I always say, are you really sure we are smarter? Are you really sure? You know, we developed these antibiotics. We say, but we study, we put bacteria under the microscope and we studied, we are smart and they are bugs. Or we study them. Are you sure they don't study us? They study us all the time. You want to know why? We make antibiotic after antibiotic. They figure out, they study us and they say, hey guys, come here, let's have a meeting. These humans have, Pfizer has made a new drug. How are we going to beat it? Then they go in there, they say, okay, you know what? If we change this gene a little bit, do a little mutation, take this out and insert something else, this drug can't kill us. Virus constantly become resistant. To say that from our perception that they don't study us, they study us too. We study them, they study us. We have no right to insult God's creation and to be so cocky. We are obligated to be respectful to the wonderful planet that we live on. I was going to mention a lot of things that I wrote here, but let's skip a little bit, otherwise we are never going to make it. So the summary of this is that mind and consciousness is the workings of our brain. We had a lot of discussion in the first session of mind-body medicine about the brain, how brain works, how it is wired. And so maybe we will mention again, but those who missed that, you can always listen to that on the internet, because that background is necessary, how the brain works, how the brain translates into consciousness of certain things that are going on in our environment. So let's take all the different approaches that sciences have taken in understanding mind and consciousness. There are several theories. And when we say theory is not what we mean in common parlor. In common parlor, we will say, my theory is that, my philosophy of life is blah, blah, blah. That's common language that we use. In science, when you say a theory, we have a theory, it is not taken lightly. Theory in science means body of evidence. It's like sort of a hypothesis. I think that consciousness is this. This is where consciousness comes from. You have a hypothesis. And you don't have a hypothesis like a philosopher because you think so. No, you have to provide some body of evidence and say, you know, based on this and this and this and this observation, based on this and this and this experiment, I think consciousness emerges from such and such. Now, this is my hypothesis. Now, is the hypothesis always going to come true? Not necessarily. That is the difference between hypothesis and the law of physics or biology, so to speak. Hypothesis, when it gets tested, it may or may not come true. But you have to have a working hypothesis. If you don't have a hypothesis, then you can't move on. You can't work in the, grope in the dark and don't have a direction. You're trying to test something that you think there's a body of evidence that we see if we can do an experiment that will show that what we thought is true is actually true versus it's false. A lot of times, theories turn out to be false. So that's the difference. It's very important to know that it is important to formulate theories, hypotheses before you can move on. There are several schools of thought. There are hypotheses. One of them is Chris and Crick, Francis Crick, who was one of the inventors of DNA molecule. He's working with Christoph. That is one school. There are several theories. One of my own idea about consciousness has been that consciousness is some kind of global phenomenon that arises from coordinated activity of the whole brain. And this is actually, I was very happy to, this is what I always thought, and just about a month ago I was first time very happy to read that a scientist in France, in Yvette, France, Raphael Gallard, he did some experiment that is what it is showing. It's a coincidence. My hypothesis was not based on any experimentation. Sometimes, remember the gut feeling? You use your gut feeling based on your knowledge, your background. So that's the gut feeling I always have. So I'm looking more into that and see if they're doing more experiments. There are many theories, and we're going to leave it to when we go into theories in the next seminar. But today I'm going to talk more about approach. Taking an approach to understand something is not the same thing as theory. Theories are hypotheses. Approach is how are you going to conduct experiments? How are you, what technique you're going to follow? What will form the basis of experimentation? In other words, you have to have an idea how you're going to go about doing that. You have a hypothesis, but you have to know how you are going to conduct your experiment. You can't just pull experiment out of thin air. You have to have, a drawing, a diagram, or see what equipment you're going to use. And so similarly, there are many approaches scientists are taking. Some of them are just focused on functional MRIs, looking into the brain, see which areas light up, where the blood flow grows when you think of something or when you do something, when you perform an action. Others are working, stimulating the nerves, see electric circuits, see what really happens, which areas are engaged. Others are studying the brain as a whole, and yet others are looking at taking advantage of the fact that if someone has a brain lesion already, see what happens. So pick out people from the population who have a brain damage or something happened to them, and then study their brain. And if we can correlate what the defect is with what the consequence is, then we will probably understand how things work. And I'm kind of biased towards this kind of approach because I'm a physician. So, it doesn't necessarily mean this is the perfect approach to take, but it certainly means that it gives us amazing information about how the brain works, how the mind works, because we study case after case after case after case and correlate. When we take images and see what's going on with the brain, and you find the same thing on a similar lesion, then we kind of start to draw conclusions and understand. And then we can use that knowledge when we study the next person. The beauty of this is that because we are humans, we cannot do an experiment. On rats we can do that, but on humans we can say, okay, let me do experiment on you. Let's first remove a little piece of the brain here and see what happens to you. We can't do that to humans. So we have to wait until someone had a bullet go through the brain, or had a bleed, or was born with a defect. So you already have a problem, or you were born with it, or something happened, just some environment did something to you. You are a available subject for experiment. Now we cannot harm you any further because harm is already done. Nature has done it to you. But in the process of studying you as a subject, maybe we can find out first what's wrong, and hopefully it will also help us find cures and treatments. So that approach I love, and we're going to go into so much detail about examples. It's a very fascinating subject. Now, a defect in the brain can happen in 3 ways. I'm going to oversimplify this thing so that we have a perspective. We should have a perspective what we are looking at. You can be born with something. In other words, there's a genetic defect. You were born with it. There was some mutation you inherited from your mother or father, or from generations ago. And this defect either caused an anatomical change in your brain, in other words, physical change, or it caused physiological change, some kind of chemical imbalance. So we are done?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, we will go as far as we can go. And then on March 26th, the 3rd session, we will continue that discussion. So 3 ways a person can have an extraordinary brain. What do I mean by extraordinary brain? Whenever we use the terminology extraordinary, we think of prodigy, genius. But when I use the word terminology extraordinary, I simply mean a brain that's not ordinary. I'm not talking about if it's good or bad, it's wonderful or autistic. I'm just using a terminology saying, in order for a brain or a mind for that matter, or consciousness for that matter, to become extraordinary, abnormal, which is not normal, it could be good or bad, for that to happen, there are 3 ways this can happen. First way, genetic defect, you're born with it, there was a mutation, it caused a missing part of the brain, or overdevelopment section of the brain, or underdevelopment, or missing something, or something additional which doesn't really belong there, or the brain is intact but it caused a physiological problem. So my own son who has narcolepsy would be a good example of a genetic defect which caused physiological change, which means when you take MRI, everything is going to look normal, but there is a physiological microscopic change which image is not going to show. So brain doesn't produce hypocretin, which leads to a disease process that we can study those brains. Now some brains are more difficult to study than others depending on what lesion exists in the brain and what is detectable and what is not. So that is one way a brain can become extraordinary or abnormal. What is the second way? Second way, it can happen due to some environmental insult. It can happen in embryo. For example, before you were born, your mother was abusing drugs, or for that matter, embryo was growing fine, but something happened at the time of birth. When the baby was being born, the shoulders were too big, and you were pulling on it, and you pulled on the nerves, and the baby was choking. Brain did not get oxygen or blood flow. That messed up the brain and caused a defect. So the environment, embryological environment inside the embryo's growth, and then in some cases outside, once you are growing up, there can be environmental influence or insult that can cause a defect in the brain. We can study those subjects. What is the third way? There is a third way people out there can have a problem, end up with an extraordinary brain. That can happen from accidents. It's very common. And we'll give you hundreds of cases, very fascinating, like amazing, beautiful cases, what happened to these people. A bleed in the brain, a concussion, electric shock, a bullet went through the brain. So there are many things can happen which either cause hypoxia, lack of oxygen, or a blood clot in the brain that led to some changes in awareness, in perception, in consciousness. And if we study that defect and look at the corresponding defect that occurred, whether it's good or bad, we can begin to understand how the brain works and how the mind works. And there have been literally hundreds of cases studied of autistic children, of savants, of synesthetes, amazing, like absolutely wonderful cases that we will go over, many examples. And we have come to the point, that discussion will be for the next seminar, but we have to come to a point where we now believe that actually we all have the software for any ability. It's only we are starting to figure out how to exploit, how to fool the brain, how to rewire the brain, because brain is plastic. You can change it. It's like a clay that you can mold it the way you want. That is why I said there is no reason to be depressed. Those who understand this idea and are willing to learn. In last seminar, I actually gave examples. I encouraged some people. I said, bring all paralyzed stroke patients. I will do an experiment with them. See how their paralysis comes back, their feelings. And none of those people came who have actually stroke. And I was actually going to show them, you're spending millions of dollars with neurologists, show you simple experiment. Neurologists do the same, but they have to make money too. They will do a lot of stuff on you when you go. A very simple thing that you can do. So the end of these experiments and examples that I will give you, probably 100, then I will show you examples how we have been able to change mind or brain and rewire ourselves and change the way we think, and therefore we can change our destiny. Thank you for coming.